This is Eyewitness Exclusive. Our guest this evening is Reverend Frederick J. Eicherenkota II, better known as Reverend Ike. Known for his flamboyant style and unabashed love of big cars and cash, Reverend Ike tells his flock that they can get the good things in life through belief in themselves and God. Interviewing Reverend Ike will be Bob Lee, Roger Shard, Roger Grimsby, and Bill Butel. We'll begin our conversation in just a moment.
Reverend Ike, your religious rocket, if we may call it that, really went up starting in '66. Yet you were an active preacher between 1958 and '66. What were you preaching then? Hellfire and damnation?
Well, mostly before 1966, I was what is commonly known as a fundamentalist preacher, preaching heaven and hell, and however, already developing into what I call my new philosophy, the science of living. I just came to analyze the whole business of hell, for example, and I discovered it was really no need to tell people that they were going to hell. I discovered that people were already in hell. So many people are already in a hell of a fix, one kind or another, if you please. And so I thought it rather useless to continue to preach to people that they were going to hell when they were already in some kind of a hell of a fix. And I decided that what people needed was a solution, a way out of the type of hell of a fix that they may be in.
Well, now, you've been quoted as saying newspapers and magazines are always saying how I like money and that's all I really like. Well, I don't deny it. Is that so?
Now, I think on the money proposition, I do not believe that I like money any more than anyone else. I think the thing is that I'm not hypocritical about my liking money.
All right. You've also been quoted as saying to your congregation, I hope you are proud of the way I like because you are spending $1,000 a week to buy my clothes. Is that a correct figure?
That's a close approximation. Realize now, however, that we have been making television programs for national release now for several months. As a matter of fact, we've been making videotapes for our upcoming national television series for over a year. And photographs are always being taken of me in every service, everywhere. And this necessitates quite a bit of wardrobe change, if you please. As a matter of fact, I need as much of a wardrobe as any Hollywood star.
Okay. You've described yours as a do-it-yourself church, the God in each of us. Quoting from your Action magazine, a lady said to me, Reverend Ike, I've already finished paying out one blessing plan pledge of $100. When should I stop with the blessing plan? I answered, you should stop pledging and giving on the blessing plan whenever you want God to stop blessing you. Does he turn it off when she turns it off?
No, there is no God in the sky or anywhere else to either turn on or turn off anyone's blessing or benefits. A person turns on his own blessing, a person turns off his own blessing or benefits, whatever you want to call it. Giving and receiving, to me, are two ends of the same stick. There cannot be any correct receiving without a correct understanding of giving. A person who has the attitude and the practice of giving is also a receiving person. And I have found out in my ministry that the more people learn to give, the more they receive, because giving opens a person to receiving. And I practice this myself. I practice the blessing plan, as we call our plan of believing and giving for prosperity, just as I urge my parishioners to do. I give to those ministries and to those things which I believe are helping people.
Prosperity, though, can't come without the giving?
I do not believe that prosperity is possible for anyone without some kind of giving. As a matter of fact, everyone is always giving in some way or another. For example, I suppose that you get a salary, and whatever you get because you give. A person who works for a paycheck, for example, is giving. I don't want to restrict this attitude of giving, or the practice of giving, just simply to someone putting money in the plate at church. In life itself, we're always giving. And whatever we give to life, whatever we give to our profession, whatever we give to our jobs, we receive in like measure.
Reverend Ike, Roger Sharp.
Reverend Ike, your critics sometimes maintain that you're basically a total rip-off. You're taking money from people in the ghetto that should go for food and clothing. How do you answer those critics?
Well, first of all, people give because they choose to give. And the next thing is this: it would perhaps surprise people to know that my supporters and those who believe in my philosophy and who are always receiving my counsel are not necessarily just the people in the so-called ghettos. We have people who support this ministry and who are constantly in contact with me through the mail and in person for counsel, people who represent all social and economic levels.
You've been somewhat critical of the welfare system. Just how do you feel about that?
Well, I have a rather cute statement that I make about welfare. Welfare has its place, but don't make it a resting place. I also say to the so-called welfare rights groups, no one has a right to be a parasite. And this takes us in to 3 points of our philosophy, which we call the science of living. In the science of living, we teach self-responsibility, self-sufficiency, self-direction, and discipline. First of all, we believe that each individual is responsible for himself to himself. We do not believe that society is responsible for the individual, but that the individual is responsible to himself, to make the very most of himself, and to make his own way in life. And I even take issue with the so-called liberals and the do-gooders in the federal government, who are always somehow or the other giving people the impression that what the so-called poor people need are just more handouts. Any kind of help that does not help an individual to help himself is criminal. And people get certain attitudes that, well, society owes me something, the world owes me something. But I think that the individual is responsible for himself, and the individual owes it to himself to become self-sufficient, self-supporting, self-responsible, and self-directed. And this is what we teach in our philosophy, the science of living.
Just how does an uneducated woman with 4 or 5 children living in a cold water tenement find this thing you're talking about?
Well, it happens on an individual basis. First of all, our philosophy, the science of living, teaches a person, an individual, to believe in himself, to believe that I can be and do and have the good that I desire, to put it in the first person. And we're constantly receiving testimonies from people who are in the most dire circumstances. For example, I had a very interesting tour of the South and through South Carolina about a year ago. And there it was my great pleasure to meet some people which fit the description which you've just given. Widows with children. As one lady said, Reverend Ike, before I started believing in myself and taking your instruction, we lived in an old run-down house. I could not keep my children warm or well in the winter because of the wind blowing in from every direction. But since I began believing in myself, things have changed for me. We have a better place to live, I have a better job, and things have improved all around. I believe that there's something magic about getting a person to believe in himself, his own possibility of being, doing, and having the good which he desires.
Reverend Ike, we have to pay for our existence. Eyewitness Exclusive will be back in a moment.